people say you should forget your pains, nah, I want to remember them. I want to learn from them. I just don't want to relive them. There is a huge difference. Now let me put this out there, that nobody chooses their pain on purpose. Nobody puts themselves in a painful situation on purpose. So dealing with it is always going to be difficult. Now we decide whether we want to make it short-term difficult or long-term difficult. And I'm not talking about coping mechanisms, right? I'm not talking about throwing things, getting mad, closing yourself up, or locking yourself up in a room. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how you're going to react to the pain. That will decide whether your pain is going to be long-term or short-term. Now, the majority of us, we victimize ourselves. Let's face it, we've all done this. We've all at some point told ourselves that we deserved this problem because we're unlucky, or because, we carry bad luck, or because we're unworthy of happiness. We've all fallen into that trap and felt that those low moments in our lives, whether as a kid or as an adult. And when we do this, we don't realize that we're closing the chapter in a way, because we are excusing ourselves. We're not learning anything from the problem. We don't really actually look into it. We just tell ourselves that we deserved it, we were worthy of it, and we close the chapter. And now this pain becomes a baggage, and we're going to carry it until we stumble upon our next hurdle in life. Because let's face it, we all go through multiple hurdles, big or small. We all go through multiple pains throughout our lifetime. And what happens is, when we stumble upon our next problem, we revisit, or we open this baggage from the past. And a lot of us, our first reaction is, remember that last time when I failed at that project or failed at that relationship? And see, now I'm going through this other issue. It's because I'm unlucky. It's because these things happened to me. And we fall into this loop where we are living our current pain, and we have started to live our past pain, and it becomes worse. And this is such a dangerous place to be in, because now we don't just trust the universe a little less, we trust ourselves a little less. We feel that these things happen just to us, and they're meant to happen. We fall into a loop. It's a long-term recurring pain, because we start living the current problem, the past problem, and probably any other future problems. Very few of us decide to make the pain short-term. And I don't mean just forgetting the problem. I actually mean quite the opposite. I mean sitting there and cutting the wound open as deep as possible. Performing an operation on ourselves, figuratively speaking, of course. These people understand that the pain or the problem that has risen in their life is probably a consequence of a decision that they might have taken, or a reaction to a thought that they might have put into action in their day-to-day life. And they understand that, okay, fine, I hate this. I am terribly in pain. I don't like this, which is why I'm never going to let this happen to me ever again. So I am going to make sure I get to the root cause, and I make sure I understand what I did wrong, so that I never do it again to face this issue, because I know how much it hurts. I can feel it. I'm experiencing it right now. So these people lock themselves up, and they cut the wound open. They start the operation. They analyze everything. They relive everything in a very short span of time. Of course, probably crying all day, probably having 4 tubs of ice cream. Again, different coping mechanisms. But these people understand. They dig so deep. They keep digging until they touch the bone. Until they figured out what was wrong on their side. And then they stitch that wound up so well that it never needs to be opened again. Or it never needs to be restitched again, if that makes sense. So these people, when now they stumble upon a new problem in their life, which I repeat, everybody does, these people will revisit the past to make sure that they're not repeating the same mistake for this new problem, but they won't relive it, because they've already sat there and lived the whole, painful situation. They didn't just close it. They didn't just excuse themselves or close the matter up quickly and dragged themselves. They sat there, dealt with it, and then moved forward, extracted the lesson that they needed to extract. So the next time they face an issue, they're going to revisit the past, but they're not going to relive it anymore because they've already lived it properly. Of course, the other person who victimizes themselves, they cry as well and all that, but they've just excused themselves. They didn't sit there and learn the lesson that they had to learn probably. And mind you, people who still analyze their mistakes, they may still fail again, and they may still cry again. But this time, remember, they're only dealing with this one new issue. They don't have any baggage with them, so they're not going to deal with this new issue and open up the past wounds as well, because they already did that. They've worked on that. So they can revisit as many times as possible to make sure that they're learning their lessons and they're not repeating it again. But they're not going to sit and cry about that because they've already gone through that excruciating pain. Short term, but excruciating pain. And they knew how it felt. And they actually sat and worked on themselves. And probably as a result changed for better. But there's still always space for more or room for more. So these people, even if they fail again, they only have one issue to deal with right now. Not, what this one and a past one and another past one. So again, it's all up to you. You decide whether you prefer a short-term excruciating pain or a long-term recurring pain. And again, with both you're going to cry. With both you're going to find out ways of dealing with it. But your reaction is extremely important. Are you willing to close it off and excuse yourself? Or are you willing to work on it? You decide.